Hello and welcome to the Joygasm Effect, and today I'm sharing some sacred space with Toni Reilly. Welcome, Toni.
Hi, Kerrie. Thanks for having me, and hello, everyone.
Toni is an author, an internationally recognised regression facilitator, and is the creator of the SoulLife Programs, seminars and trainings, where, Toni, you guide thousands of people worldwide with your unique intuitive approach to personal transformation.
That's it, Kerrie. That's right. Personal transformation is my favourite thing. I think that all of our, healing of anything or moving through issues in our lives all comes through personal transformation.
Okay, so just tell us a little bit about what that term means for you, Toni, like personal transformation.
Personal transformation, I think, is the realization that we have when we realize that everything in our lives, so's all about that, that everything in our lives comes back to us because, well, I guess I realized it through my own awakening where I didn't really think I had any issues. Of course, I had so many, I just didn't realize it. I don't know how to stop that doing that. Sorry about that. But then I guess the thing was, even in the beginning of personal transforming myself, I would still look outside for the cause of my troubles or my insecurities. I came to realise it was all about me, and that no matter who's annoying us or making us angry or making us sad or feel dumb or whatever, it still comes back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And
transformation.
Yes.
And it's so empowering. I guess it gets a bit rough, and sometimes I remember in the early days these realizations that would come to me and I'd think, oh, I've done that to myself. And I used to cry a lot about it actually with the realization comes like, oh my God. So, but I guess it's how we work through it.
Yeah, so just if we just go back a little bit, Toni, just tell us a little bit, how did you discover your spiritual self, and how did you get to that place where you started to tap into your own personal transformation?
So for me, it started, I was about 35 and I left my husband, which created a big different direction in my life. But the main thing that happened was I became absolutely compelled to research myself, soul search I called it, and part of that process led me to the understanding that I had these intuitive abilities or psychic abilities. Yeah. I call them intuition now, yeah. but those abilities. And so part of trying to discover, I was told many times that I had them, and I thought, no, I don't, because I had a perception of what that meant. And so when that breakup happened, I thought, I have to find out about this. So I asked, what do I do? And the person told me to meditate. Well, it never occurred to me that people just meditate. Like, it never occurred to me before then. And I thought, isn't that what Buddhists do, monks and that kind of thing? So I thought, oh my God, maybe I just have to find somewhere like that to meditate, because I wanted to know how this all works. So turns out I didn't have to find any monks, but I Googled, and actually at that time there was not much of what we do on the internet. It was kind of, not that what we're doing is new, but it was new on the internet. So anyway, I'm Googling away, and I found this woman in Melbourne who ran classes from her lounge room, meditation or development classes. So I went along, and in the first class I could see stuff in here, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Believe me, it was nothing exciting. I could see it. Actually, it was a window, but I could see it so clearly, a window that I'd never seen before, and sort of a portion of a room. And I thought, wow, I really can do this stuff. And part of that process, so here I was thinking I'm going to, build up this intuition. And what happened in that process of slowing down and meditating was my issues started to come up.
As they do.
Yeah. And I was thinking, what? This is, at first it was really interesting, but it hit me pretty hard because they were essentially about self-worth, which I thought I was a really confident person. And I kept being told things about that. So I would explore them then and reflect on it and realise how self-worth had been a big thing for me. And it had been pretty damaged, actually. But anyway, I do remember every time I meditated, something else would come up. Or, you know, in the group, someone would give you a message. It's like, I never thought of that before, but you'd think about it and go, oh, that really does apply to me. And then I thought, how many freaking issues do I have? And, of course, they continued on. Or they essentially might have been the same ones, but they're that deep that one realisation didn't get rid of them. It was a big process. My God, and it's 11 years later now. And so I've been looking for a long time.
Yeah, and one of the things, because I hear you and I know, like, you know, similar experiences, and, you know, self-worth has been my issue as well. But one of the things, as a mediumship teacher, one of the things that I've found over the years is that is the natural process of the soul, that once we actually start connecting with our spirit and our soul, that those issues come up. But I've also found that it's at that point where people pull away, you know, that's when they will actually deny spirit and start walking away from it. So what gave you the courage, Toni, to actually keep moving through, to actually face and move and walk through that healing? Because I know that can be painful. It can be, you know, unbalancing.
Yeah.
Confronting.
And it was.
Yep.
I don't know what else to say except that I felt compelled. I probably didn't even for a second think to myself, this is wrong for me. There was this compulsion. I'd never had it before. And this drive, I couldn't stop it. So there were so many things I didn't even realise I was capable of that I did, not just in the process of my own self-awareness, you know, coming up and my transformation happening, but even in this field that we ended up working in this, you know, with our intuitive abilities or the mediumship. It was, I couldn't stop it. And it was amazing. So sometimes I'd be having my breakdown, let's say, like where I'm crying. I never minded, actually. I know it's not pleasant, but I just let it happen. And I never really thought to myself, I have to show the world a brave face. I didn't get on Facebook crying. I didn't do that. But it was happening. And I guess when it would happen, I just probably withdrew a little bit. And sometimes I also found that when I was in those processes, there's talking to no one helps, because I think you have to, it's all about you and you have to really personally reflect on it. So I guess there were times when the withdrawal period was so relevant it wasn't funny.
Yep. Sorry, I've got a bit of a scratchy throat today. So fast forward 11 years and you've been going through that journey. How does your day-to-day connection to spirit evolve through your day now? Like, what does your connection to spirit do for you on a daily basis these days?
I guess that what it does is assures me that, well, to yes, do this, or no, don't do that. I guess it gives me an assurance of trusting what I'm doing next. And can I still admit that even though this intuition is so strong, my will or ego, which I kind of consider the same thing, it still comes in and we get caught up in that sometimes, like, oh, I felt so strongly I should do that, and then my mind will still come in and go, but maybe that's not the right thing, and I'll start analysing it. So sometimes it's absolute and clear. The feeling always is, actually, but my mind does still come in and battle with me sometimes. But I guess basically that feeling for me, I feel really assured all the time. So even if things get rocky, I still really always feel like it's all kind of meant to be. And so no matter what, it's like, yeah, well, this is supposed to happen for whatever reason, and I find it really reassuring.
Excuse me.
That there's this aspect of ourselves that we can rely on.
And I get where you're coming from there, because I know for me personally, I find it to be, even though sometimes we have doubt, but in the core of us, we know there's no doubt. Like,
yes.
So even though something might be happening that we're unsure of, we still know that we're on the right path, that we're in the right direction, and little things like it doesn't take us as long to make decisions, and
that's right. It doesn't take as long to make decisions, and I think even if you get ruffled up by maybe stepping back a little bit, one thing when we're working with people I find is as much as you can guide or help other people so easily, still when it comes to us, I don't think we're exempt from having to go through the same things that they do. So I have to sometimes think, practice what you preach. And it can take me a little bit to get back into that sort of acceptance phase. It probably comes a lot quicker than it ever did years ago.
Yeah.
So what might have taken, months or even years in a sort of a grieving state might start to feel clear after a week or two.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or, of course, decision making can be real quick.
Yeah. So it's not, we don't waver as much as what we used to.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is we certainly get more comfortable with being out of our comfort zone, and we're more prepared to actually go there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know, like, when you go on a journey of personal transformation, and I've seen this again in my work as a teacher, where I would see people come in and after a couple of years of soul journeying, they will discover their purpose. They would discover the starts of their purpose. And I know just before we came online that let's talk a little bit about this, how you can initially feel a call from the soul to move into what you feel is your purpose, but with hindsight, with years of soul traveling, you actually discover that there's actually a greater soul purpose at work here. And so I know for me, it was sort of like my initial purpose was mediumship and connecting and teaching from that space. But these days, the same thread was always using mediumship as a tool to connect with the soul in some way. So now that's really evolved into the greater aspects of my work. So how has that shown up in your life, Toni?
I suppose the truth is that I did initially think that my purpose was to help other people somehow and to, assist them, guide, whatever it might be, influence them. And I'm sure it is to an extent, but that underlying thread, even in that initial pull to start to work with people, was me and understanding me and how I worked, how did I tick. No. And I also think that if we have not looked at ourselves as, well, deeply and probably somehow transformed or become self-aware, then I don't think we can be as effective working with other people, because I think what then happens is we put our own shit onto other people. You don't necessarily realise you're doing it, but that's what happens. So I think the more aware that we are, the more effective I believe we are as being able to work with other people. Just makes us more accepting of them. We don't want them to do what we've done or follow our path, because ours is not for everyone. So it just makes us, I think, more tolerant and accepting of, and more able to help people really well
Yeah.
because we worked so hard at ourselves.
Well, it creates that objectivity, and you move
Yeah.
into a space of not being attached to
Yes.
to whatever interaction you have with them.
Yeah.
So that just allows them to be who they are and be free. And as I'm saying that, I'm actually just sort of becoming aware of how that's even really important in our personal relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just that objectivity and just allowing people the freedom to be who they are and hold that space.
That is so right. And I think for me personally, the relationships have been my biggest learning curve. And actually not so much about relationships, about me. And I guess the expectations I had of probably that person and expectations of myself that I placed on me to fit in and, you know, lead this life that was a bit of a status quo. So, yeah, they've been huge. But I think those having expectations of those other people or, you know, these partners or my husband and then a big partner after that was my biggest learning lessons, learning curves. They poked me and prodded me. They were awesome as well. But, yeah, from a personal growth point of view, they were my big tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And expectations are just, they're such a challenging concept to learn about, because whether it's your expectations of other people, but it's even our expectations on outcomes of how we manifest and, you know, all of those sort of things as well, which just, it's probably the one area where we just constantly can get in our own way.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so right, because and it's never until hindsight that you realise, oh, you had this expectation, but it turned out this way, not this way. And then you can piece it all together and go, mm-hmm. But it's often in hindsight, isn't it, that you go, oh, okay, I get it now, really get it.
Yeah.
So I guess we don't get out of going through, we personally don't, and nor do any of the people we work with, get out of having a deep look.
No, we're always having a deep look, and we just become better at, the more aware you become, the easier it becomes to manage.
Absolutely.
You know, and to work through it, so you don't sit in that expectation, or you don't sit in that stuff that's getting in the way for as long as what you used to. That's all.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about your working so closely with spirit on a day-to-day level. Tell us a little bit about your creative process, because I know you create a lot of programs, intuitive processes. So just share with us, if you will, just a little of your creative process and how you go about tapping into an idea or bringing it into life.
Okay, well, this is probably the most exciting thing that happened when I woke up, is that creativity just flowed, and it was easy for me to, you know, get on my computer and bang this stuff out. You would probably, I still do, you read it back and go, did I write that? But you did. Yeah. So my creative process, I don't really have any rituals that I follow, but I tell you one thing that's evolved over these years is I wake up in the middle of the night. And I used to, initially I'm thinking, you're supposed to sleep through the night. And I always did sleep through the night. But then once I stopped and I thought, gee, I'm getting into a habit. Should I break it? After I relented and thought, so what? I sleep for a few hours and I wake in the night, and that's when I get my ideas. It's not every night, even though most nights I do wake up, but that's when I get my clarity. So the ideas will bang in then usually. And even I can have a whole process in my head, I suppose, that comes through, and you don't forget it somehow. I never get up in the night and write it down, although that's not entirely true, because now that I have a phone, you know, one of those smartphones, I've got it there, and I pick it up, and sometimes I can write such massive notes with one finger in that little note thing, and then get up tomorrow and follow it through with whatever it needs. So I guess I don't know that I need to do anything except listen to it when it happens. And it happens a lot, and it never ceases to amaze me, actually, because if I think back to when I was at school and you had to write or produce things, I hated it and I couldn't do it. So it was a struggle, and I guess it was the difference between letting creativity flow or being forced to do something that you're really not interested in. Yeah. So creativity, I really liken that probably as my major connection with my soul or that spirit energy. I love it.
Yeah. So how do you bring that, because that, to me, that speaks of joy, and I'm the same, I'm always, whether it's writing a blog or just, it's like I've got to write every day in some form, so how do you bring joy into your life in those ways and in other ways?
Oh, Kerrie, you know what? I think one of the most major joys in my life is actually talking and communicating. It's also one of my challenges as well. So in those partners, it's about communicating my deep feelings. But with my girlfriends, and I have a couple of lifelong girlfriends, we know everything about each other. And I think to be able to communicate with them and debrief the ideas that have come through, the creativity, that is one of the biggest joys in my life. And we like to have a glass of bubbles, or quite a few actually, while we're talking. We pull cards, and I guess, is it socialising? It used to be socialising when I was younger. I loved interacting with people. I still do. But for me now, it's more about conversation with substance. And there's never any, and maybe there never really was, but there's never any gossiping about people. It's all about, a lot about ourselves, but also studying how people are and that kind of thing. So I don't know, I guess it's a bit of studying of people, and talking about it is one of the most amazing things for me. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, I hear you. That's one of my joys as well. So I know you've got a couple of really exciting things coming up.
Yeah.
The first one is you've got a new book coming out in May. So tell us about that.
So I've got a book coming out on the 25th of May, and I've been writing that bloody book for 11 years. So I started to write it when I separated, and I used to think, you got to write that book, you've got to write the book, because I suppose I had my guidance then. But when I picked the book up years later, I was a different person in maybe the 4 or 5 years that passed from when I first wrote outlines of the chapters to when I started again. And I thought, oh my God, I'm such a victim. And what I'd written had to be entirely changed because I'd changed.
Yeah.
The headings were still the same, but the content just didn't represent me anymore, I suppose. But basically this book is my take on why we're here. So I tried to tell about why I believe we're here through my own story. So it's a bit of course I'm very much into regression and reincarnation. So it's talking about how we sort of plan what we're doing here. And one thing I find people find hard to maybe believe is that the shitty things that happen to us in life are also our purpose. Mm-hmm. So, and I think a lot of the time when things get tough, or we're grieving or hurting so bad, we think we are off track, but we're right on track. So, and it's about all of the things that happen in our lives that maybe aren't morally accepted, but they happen and they're meant to happen. So being less harsh on yourself for when these things happen, because I feel like we don't get out of anything that's supposed to cross our path.
Yeah.
And I tried to explain that through, I got a few little secrets in there, and I've bared them in order to share my beliefs. Yeah. And so that's what it's about.
Exciting, very exciting.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that you've also been working on a new video program about anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. So I I have been working on this program for about stress and anxiety, and it probably wasn't necessarily one of my passions, given everything's based on me to some extent, given that I'm not a very anxious person, but there were times in my life where it floored me, where you're feeling pinned down. And I came to discover that there were things that it was telling me to do. So I suppose, even though it feels so dreadful, it's your body talking to you. And it's giving, I think at times it's giving you a big smack because you've been avoiding doing something. So I'm going to base this anxiety program much more around not managing it. So of course, there's guided visualization in there, but it's not about managing our breathing in the moment. It's about let's fix it. Find out why you really have it, because there's always a reason. Whether this initial course I have it based around past lives, which of course can show up really weird anxiety that doesn't make sense, but day-to-day anxiety, even if it's extremely intense, can be just that we're not listening to maybe changes we need to make, or a sentence we need to say to someone, and it's like this anxiety builds until we do say it, and then it's gone. So I want that course to be about eliminating it.
To me, I always sense that it's about it's an indicator of not being in your truth in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I go through a bit of a process so that they can get to an understanding of what is at the base of this anxiety or stress, whatever they want to call it.
Yeah. And it's so needed, because it's just on the increase, isn't it? Like, you just so much more, you come in contact with people all over the place that just have it as part of their life in some way.
Did you, Kerrie, I do notice on that that observation, the young people now, whoa, it seems like it's epidemic or pandemic, whatever the correct word is, where they're sensing it so much stronger. But I feel like some of our anxiety is actually picking up on, what's going on with each other and even as a collective. And these young people that are coming in are more susceptible to picking up on it. And I feel like they don't necessarily know that that's what's happening. And so I also talk about that in this particular course, so that they can realise it's not always your fault. It can be that you're very sensitive.
Yeah.
Basically. And I guess once we know that, and you and I know this as well, but once we know it, then we can to an extent manage it.
And I think also you're right, it is the young people, which is, and because I know that we're both parents of kidults.
Yes.
And I know for me, like my kids and their friends, that anxiety is part of what they're challenged with from time to time, know. So, but I think it's also like some of it, I think that there's just what I'm sort of receiving as we're talking about it is that as the souls evolve, so a collective thing, as they evolve into this world, there's the heightened sensitivity that comes with it, because as the souls come in, it's a much more emotive energy. It's not as physical as what it was in past generations, so it's moving more into the emotion. But at the same time, we've got this collective consciousness that is actually moving more into aggression and more ego-based, and it's that the challenge of that conflict. So, like on a global scale, that's what's occurring, and that is what is occurring on a personal level, as these sensitive little emotive souls, are challenged with living in the world that collectively we're all creating,
Yes. And that's something I love to talk about, actually, is how these young people are coming in much more softer and emotive than, I mean, of course, some of us have been throughout life, but we had this strong mind and this strong self that we had jobs to do as well through the ages. But now they're bringing it back to emotion and hearts, and they're soft. And collectively, when these kids or our kids or these younger generations are in power, so when they're ruling our world, then it is going to be ruled in a very different way. And those kids are up against, well, I'm going to say us, but I guess our generation is potentially less, given that they're our kids, less opposed to them as maybe our generation, the generation after us. But one way or the other, there's a but going on, and but it is going to evolve. They're going to change everything.
Well, eventually what will happen is that but will, that war, like, it'll break through. There'll be some sort of, it might be something like World War III, but, but there'll be that breakthrough, and it is taking us to that next evolution where we are going to see that generation that come after us, Toni, that are more emotive, are more sensitive, just going to lead the world with their hearts, and that's just going to be a beautiful thing.
It will be, absolutely.
Well, I've had a really great time chatting with you today, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kerrie. Thanks for having me. It's been fantastic talking.
No, and we just sign off with one question that I always ask everyone, being that the show is called the Joygasm Effect. How are you going to achieve a joygasm in your life this week, Toni?
Well, there's, God, is there one thing? I guess I could say I'm extremely motivated at the moment with some projects that I'm working on. So that gives me massive joy. But I will certainly be connecting with a friend later in the week, and I'll have a debrief on everything. So I guess that's what it's going to be. It'll be all fun and laughter and joy, and just having a debrief.
Excellent.